Let me go ahead and introduce Mr. Muhtar Kent. As you know, he has held the reins of the Coca-Cola Company for about 6 months now. And prior to that, he worked with the company for, I guess, over half of his working life. At this point, you might say, okay, I know what's coming next. There's going to be a list of achievements and positions that chronicle his career. And I can tell you it's a most impressive list, but I'd rather do something different. I'd like to instead begin an introduction of him by telling you about one of his quotes. It's a quote that's on display at the Coca-Cola Company. And I think it reveals something important about the man that you're going to see tonight. Here's the quote: "One system, one family, one great community of people who believe that they are part of something larger than themselves." Before today, I hadn't had an opportunity to meet Mr. Kent, so I did a little homework and talked to several of my friends at Coca-Cola who know him, and they told me that this quote fits him like a glove. Over his career, in his actions and in his words, he's become known as somebody that's deeply committed to building people. And when I think of our namesake, Mr. Goizueta, and some of his core values, his interests in seeing Goizueta Business School become a place dedicated to building principals leaders, I see some parallels there. What else distinguishes this man? Mr. Kent has a reputation as a keen and brilliant student of today's dynamic and dramatic changes that are impacting our world. He's known as a master of operational aspects at the Coca-Cola Company, and what I've heard about him is that he exudes an optimism about the possibility of success and holds a passion for achieving it. Finally, what I heard about him is that he is seen as someone who possesses an unusual humility, especially for a CEO in a company of this magnitude, and maybe even more important, an openness to all that those who approach him. Again, this list of qualities reminds me of our namesake, Roberto Goizueta, and his partner at that time, Don Keogh. Think about it. During his tenure, Roberto Goizueta generated the greatest increase in shareholder value of any CEO in a major corporation anywhere in the world. Mr. Kent, I have to tell you, as a shareholder, the parallels are compelling. They give me great confidence for the future of the Coca-Cola Company under your leadership. We thank you for joining us. Now, with all those attributes, you might say, who should have a conversation with this man? Well, right here in our faculty, there's somebody that is an obvious choice, Professor Jeff Rosensweig. Like Mr. Kent, Jeff's long held a passion for understanding global business and the dynamics that drive our future. In fact, Jeff, I guess we've been at the school for quite a while, and I think maybe back 20 years ago, Jeff was selected to develop the school's Global Perspective program and to build the first course in global business that cut across the functional areas that we had at the school. And as I remember, I think it's interesting that actually Mr. Goizueta and Mr. Keogh were the spearheads of that, and the Coca-Cola Company gave you the seed money to start this program. So global business has been a passion of Jeff's for many years, and I think you'll have a wonderful conversation about that. And like Mr. Kent, he is forward-thinking. Those of you that have been students of Jeff know this, and those that don't might take a look at his critically acclaimed book, Winning the Global Game, A Strategy for Linking People and Profits. Another common passion is people. You know, Jeff gives a lot of talks as well in the media, here at the school, and as a keynote lecturer. And the one common theme that I've always heard him say is that he talks about these linkages between the global economy, between business and human development. And I think, in fact, Jeff, aren't you on CNN coming up soon? When is it?
Saturday at 10 a.m.
I think right after they talk about Barack Obama's new economic plan. You'll make some comments about that. One last comparison here is that Jeff has demonstrated over the years a deep desire to improve people's lives. He's an active volunteer active volunteer who works for and is on the board of global charities like the Medical Assistance Program International. I think this will be a great conversation. Could I ask you two to come forward and begin?
Thank you.
Well, we'll begin right away, so I get to ask some questions, but it's Mr. Kent, but I'll call you Muhtar.
Please.
And the reason I'm going to call him Muhtar is I don't know how many of you know this, but his father, Mr. Kent, is you know this, Mona, is one of the distinguished people we have had the privilege to learn about. He personally, with great courage, saved many people from the Holocaust who were on a train basically heading to what would have been their demise, and Mr. Kent got on the train with them and saved their lives. So I'm just going to call you Muhtar. Even though you have tens of thousands of people working for you, and I have a 1/8 of a secretary. But before we start, of course, you know, we're honored by Mrs. Goizueta coming, but someone is so modest, she's going to kill me for saying this, but Olga Goizueta, her daughter, was one of the highest graduates we've had of Emory Law School, and Javier is doing great things at the Coca-Cola company, but Javier... I know. And we wish you went to Emory.
I wish I would have too.
That's true. But Javier worked many years for Procter & Gamble in South America, so he's certainly been out there and doing it. But we'll get right to some questions. And one thing I'm hearing, because we have our students here and many alumni from Coca-Cola, and it sounds like there's some things that you're really focused on in your role as a relatively new CEO. I sense an excitement from our alumni about your initiative on strategic renewal. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. First, I think I want to thank Ed for the introduction. That was far too generous. And it's a great privilege and honor to be here today. I do take time to speak at many and interact at many educational establishments around the world. I've done at least 6 or 7 of these in the last 12 months. But I'm really excited to be here because of the name, and I've actually spent all my career at Coca-Cola, 32 years. I came out of college, came to New York, and had an uncle who lived there and started interviewing for jobs and ended up at Coca-Cola at the time of Paul Austin when he was the CEO and chairman, but spent under the leadership of Roberto Goizueta and Don Q for many, many years, and certainly it's therefore a huge privilege for me to be here today, especially when the Goizueta family are here. So it gives me great pleasure. Now, strategic renewal. I want to start by saying that it's really a continuation of what Neville and I have been doing over the last 3.5 years when we both came back to the Coca-Cola company. And I say came back because I was inside the Coca-Cola system, but heading up a bottling company at that time when I came back to the Coca-Cola company, when both Neville and the board asked me to come back shortly after Neville came back. And it is no secret that as with all things, there's never a straight line going up. And sometime after 1997, we had lost our way at the Coca-Cola company too. And I say that openly. And it was time to change some things. And if you take a simple way of looking at it, which is always very important to do in business, simplify things. In one word, we had become arrogant. Mm-hmm. That's why we lost our way. When you become arrogant, you move away from the touch points that matter. the touch points that matter in our business is that there's only the consumer spends that $1 once for our products, and everybody has to make a living out of that. The shop owner, or the supermarket company, global, or the small shop owner, the suppliers that give us that we buy supplies from. We have to make a living. Our bottlers have to make a living. The distributor has to make a living. The freight company has to make a living. The advertising agency, from that $1. So when you lose, when you get distant from that point when that $1 changes hands, which is inside the four walls of the customer, that's arrogance. And so then we put together what is called what is referred to inside our company as the Manifesto for Growth, because we had what was the result of that arrogance is that we had stopped growing in a wonderful business, in the best business of the world. There is no better business in the world than the non-alcoholic beverage business. I say that because if you take all consumer product categories, whether it's snack foods, whether it is confectionery, whether it is household products, beer, alcoholic beverages, cosmetics, non-alcoholic beverages grows has been growing over the last 2 decades at a faster pace than all of those, at 6%. The others, 3, 4, 2, snack foods, a little higher, 4.5%. So it's a wonderful business, and we couldn't grow. And there's one thing common to both countries and companies and people. We all have to grow. Countries have to grow. If they don't grow, if they're democratic, there's a change of government. If not, there's a revolution. Always has happened. Companies, if they don't grow, the CEO's head and the management gets changed. And if people don't grow, they just become stale. They can't renew themselves and grow. So we put together the Manifesto for Growth. Surprising, when we couldn't grow. And we said, we put a vision together around people, what kind of people we needed, portfolio, what kind of profit metrics we needed, the partners, how we interacted with our partners, both bottlers as well as customers, and the other last fifth P was planet, around because of the sustainability. And we went around implementing that, and the strategic renewal really is that, and now we're taking it to another stage and moving it the vision to 2020. What should our business look like in the year 2020? And we feel that it's a very exciting future ahead for us. Again, because it's such a great industry, and then there's also some other trends that no matter that the world is going through upheaval today, macroeconomic upheaval. The trends that we see will not really change that make it such an exciting future for us. And what are those trends? Those trends are that the world is going to see an addition of about a billion new middle class between now and 2020. No matter which way you slice and dice, and no matter what happens in the short term, where the growth is slowing down, there's going to be a billion new middle class people in the world by 2020, between now and 2020. There's going to be also a billion people that become urbanized between now and 2020. And what that translates into is really more people, on-the-go people with modern lifestyles, with more money, that are going to be demanding more of our products. And that's why we are excited, and that's why we put together that vision. And of course, in every vision you need to execute, because the vision without execution is daydreaming. But also you need to have you need to certainly have a vision with execution. Because if you execute without a vision, it's like going in the dark. You're going somewhere, but you don't know where you're going.
Well, that's wonderful, and I'm so glad you make the point about people continuing to grow. And we see that now in people over 80 years old, and I think it's so crucial. People right now are so short-term focused, though, and I think one reason is there's so much fear and pain out there in the job market. And I feel it in my own students. Even this being an executive MBA program, some executives, while they've been in the program, have lost their job because of the economy. Most of the others fear losing their jobs, no matter how good they are. As you know, sometimes it's indiscriminate if a firm is going to have a major downsizing. Perhaps you could give some insight into your ideas of leadership development. What kind of people do you look to promote? Do you look to hire? What kind of traits do you think are people who will not only survive but ultimately thrive?
Well, firstly, my advice to people that are coming into the job market is the following: don't always think of going to large businesses first. The smaller the businesses, the more you learn and the better you understand what are the critical touch points, how money is made. The smaller the business, the more respect you have for cash. In big businesses,
that's true.
In big businesses, you never have you don't understand. People never touch cash. It's always there. Plane tickets are paid, electricity bills. The electricity in the morning is there because somebody pays the bill. Somebody goes to the bank and negotiates and gets the money for ensuring that the salaries are paid at the end of the month. But no one ever sees cash. One of the things that I really wanted to do when I first came back to the Coca-Cola company is I sat down with the CFO and I said, how can we create a cash atmosphere for 1 week where everything has to be done by cash? We have suitcases of cash. Because that gives you a respect for cash. So I say that's so important in this day and age, particularly because one of the big ills of today's world is that people just lost touch with that and lost touch with what is called the balance sheet. And it was and leveraged it because they didn't have the respect for cash. Small business ensures that you have a respect for cash because you are responsible for making sure that it's there when you need it. That's right. And you act accordingly. One of the biggest benefits that I had in my career is that I went to work for a fairly small bottler at some point in my career, and that just opened my eyes because I had to negotiate with suppliers to extend supplier credits. I had to negotiate with banks for loans. I had to make sure that the balance sheet part of the business it was on my shoulders, and I had to do all that. That gives you a real perspective on things, and therefore you will never get caught over leveraging yourself, and you'll never get caught with where you're in a situation with no cash. That's right. Another thing I do is I never leave my house without cash. I always have a little bit. But the other thing is, I give advice to people that are going into the job market. Don't be afraid of working in small businesses, small companies. You learn so much. And then you can progress into bigger companies and so forth.
That's right. And I think that idea of cash is something, Javier, you may know this, but I worked in Jamaica, for instance, and everyone has a few $100 US dollars, and I think you're right because you don't know when things get tough, and that is a store of value. What are some positive steps you would recommend MBAs to take as they face what is going to be maybe the most competitive job market since maybe, 1980 perhaps? I think a lot of life is differentiation. How do you differentiate yourself? You do it through brand, for instance, as well as quality.
I think be yourself. Don't try too hard, but be to differentiate yourself and sell yourself. Just be yourself. And Ed said that I have an optimistic trait. The first thing is that things will ever be as bad as you think. Don't be an optimist all the time, but do think positively about the future. I have, again, a simple belief, and that is that this country is going to come out of this crisis quicker than people think. It went into it first, specific reasons for all of that, but it's going to come out first. It's going to come out quicker than we all think. It's going to come out quicker than we all think for one simple reason. This country is the most entrepreneurial country in the world. It has the most flexible labor laws in the world, and hopefully they won't change.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And you know, in 1978, when I joined the Coca-Cola company here in Atlanta, the atmosphere wasn't too different. You know, I look back, there was this incredible fear that Japan was going to take every single job in the United States.
It's true.
Inflation was up, unemployment was the highest, and it was gloom and doom.
That's right.
And look what happened. America basically replaced 40 million antiquated jobs with 80 million new technology jobs. It did what it does best, reinvented itself, re-innovated and re-innovated again, and created one of the biggest continuous booms we've ever seen.
That's right.
And I believe it's going to happen again. I think there's, tremendous wind in the sails of the new administration, more than I've seen certainly since the times of JFK. I think that's a huge positive. I also have a simple belief that, for at least for the next 25, 30 years, after that, who knows? But at least for the next 30 years, it is, unless brand America is strong, the world is not going to be a good place for our children to live in.
Yes.
After that, there may be, two powers, China and the United States, and so after 30 years. But for the next 30 years, fundamentally, if brand America is not strong, the world is not going to be a good place for our children to live in. And, unfortunately, you look around the world, up until 3 months ago, the image indicators for brand America were terrible. I mean, if you look back to 9/11, where they were in all countries around the world and where they were 3 months ago, it had deteriorated tremendously. Right. And I believe that it's going to improve. I think that's going to have a positive sentiment around the world, I believe. That's right. Also. And that's why I think that we are, with all the stimulus that's going to happen, I think this, hopefully, the new administration will learn a few things, will take some heat from the Chinese stimulus package. I think that's, by the way, I think that's the best that I've seen so far, because it focuses on small and medium-sized enterprises.
That's right.
More than any other stimulus package that I've seen in Europe or the United States. So, and I think if that's done well, if that's implemented well, executed well, I do think that we'll come out quicker than we think. So I don't think we should program ourselves to say that the next, increment of time is going to be the worst time we've seen. Yeah. We may be surprised, and I hope we are. Well, I believe we will be.
I appreciate you say that, sir, because as a leader, you make decisions that can affect that. I've always been impressed with the power of self-fulfilling prophecies. And, all these people out there with all this gloom and doom, they could bring it on. But if leaders like yourself and decision makers will picture a better future, we will have a better future. And I think that is what's going to happen. Helene Gayle here, who's the CEO of CARE, I know you know the president-elect, and you travel the world. It's wonderful how quickly the image of the U.S. has come back up. Frankly, 2 or 3 years ago, I thought it would take maybe a decade, and it seems like it's taking months. So I think that there are these positive signs, and your own beliefs are very positive for us. In terms of where we are, where we could be going, and even perhaps broader issues as well as the economy, whatever you would like to talk about, do you feel like we're at an inflection point? I've heard it said that you see an inflection point perhaps, and your vision could incorporate that.
Well, it's part of what I said, but kind of incorporate it into my thinking there. But before I do so, I want to give you a little story on the subject that we just talked about before. The day after the elections, I was in Paris having a meeting with one of the presidents of one of our European customers, Europe-wide customer. And I was having the meeting in his restaurant. They have about 6,000 restaurants in Europe. And I was having a meeting in one of their restaurants in Paris. And I was wearing a pin that had the American flag on it and had Obama underneath it. It was a fairly big pin that had the American flag mainly, and then Obama underneath. And at the end of the meeting, he said to me, his name is Denny Hennequin, he said to me, can I have your pin? I'm going to walk to work from the restaurant. My work is a kilometer away, and I want to wear this. And he said, it will probably take me 10 steps before someone else takes it off of me. And he said, if I had said that I want to wear a pin with the American flag a year ago and walk on the streets of Paris, and if I had said that also 10 other people will want it from me in the next 10 steps, they would have thought I would be head of Flat Earth Society. And that sort of basically summarizes, I think, the sentiment around the world. And France was one of the countries where this image indicators were single digits.
That's right.
Up until 2.5 months ago. So I think that's a tremendous change, positive change in the world that will, and as you well know, as economics is all about psychology.
That's right.
There's nothing more, nothing. It's all about the psyche of the human consumer.
That's right.
And consumers never spend money about how they feel about today. They spend money about how they feel about tomorrow.
That's right. That's right.
So all of this is connected. So I think there's some good positive vibes about the future.
Well, that's a very powerful story, And Helene, we've spoken about this, but leaders tell stories of common aspiration, and I think that's a wonderful story, which I will now steal, of course, as I go around. I might cite you when I'm on CNN Saturday, or I might not.
So let's not lose the other point.
It was. I think you pretty much answered it, but are we at an inflection point?
Right. The inflection point is the following. I think the world is entering an era, in the next decade or so, of essentially, I think, high commodity prices and high energy prices. I think the fact today that it's volatile and come all the way down to 40, we should not be fooled by that. I think over the next 10, 20 years, we're going to be in a world with generally higher energy prices and generally higher food prices. I think we need to ensure that we all can deal with it properly. As businesses, as individuals, as countries, we need to deal with it in the appropriate way. And then the other two important things which are part of this new equilibrium, which I mentioned before, is the increase in middle class and increase in urbanization. So all of this generates, I think, a new equilibrium that is linked to the planet, the green movement, sustainability, and it's not because they are nice words or fashionable, but it just makes good business sense for companies and for individuals and for all of us to ensure that we are entering a world that is going to have higher gasoline prices, higher energy prices. We need to therefore ensure that we do what is expected of us to drive more responsibly, consume more responsibly, and produce more responsibly.
That's right. Yes, that's right.
And as this is as individuals, as countries, but also as businesses. Right. And I think that in the next decade or so, there is an increasing need for business, for civil organizations and non-profit organizations, and for government to collaborate more effectively than ever before to ensure that we have the right solutions for sustainability. And we have a simple, notion of this in the Coca-Cola company, and that is that unless we can ensure that we play our role to create sustainable communities, we know that we're not going to have a sustainable business. And that it's as simple as that. And it's because it just also makes good business sense.
Yes.
It's not because it's fashionable and that it's nice to write in the annual report or your corporate sustainability report.
Yeah. And you can.
We should probably move on, if that's all right.
I was going to ask one more question. Yes. Yeah.
I always said about that, he's got stage fright.
Well, we sort of. I always like to end on something personal. That's what I wondered. But what issue, as you look out, is most important to you? And also, a lot of CEOs really have tunnel vision, and it's so hard to run a company in 200-something countries. But I hear you have very well-developed hobbies, at some great level of expertise, not just goofing around. Maybe you could take a minute to tell us what interest is most compelling to you, and maybe if you have a minute, a hobby that you, when you step aside, you enjoy.
Well, I don't have too much time for my hobbies right now, but I do have a hobby, and that is I have a farm, and I produce organic olive oil on that farm. I have trees, and I have an old mill,
Wow.
and a 100-year-old mill that works with steam, and I bottle them. I have a brand, but I don't get there very often these days. It's on the shores of the Aegean in Turkey. It's an olive farm, and I love olive trees because they usually go with good weather, blue sea, peace, and culture. That's a hobby, and the other thing is that in terms of business, if you ask me what keeps me awake, or what sort of I fear the most is that arrogance and complacency and getting away from that point where is the point of impact, I call it, for our business, and that's why I get into the marketplace at least 2 to 3 times a month, in different countries, every month. And I go into the market with my colleagues, and every time, without fail, I learn something about our business.
That's right.
After 32 years, every time I learn something new about our business. And one fundamental thing about the market is that it never lies.
Yeah, how true.
And it's about the pricing, it's about the brand, it's about the package, it's about the channel, it's about all of those things, the price, how it interacts, which brand, which package, which channel, which price works in the market, and works better than other combinations of permutations of that, what we call the brand, price, pack, channel, occasion, architecture. And really, the thing about business is that unless you simplify it, it never works. It doesn't matter how big a business is. All businesses are simple. Because business is something simple. It's just, you make sure that you focus on the right things, you prioritize, you align. In large business, you've got to align more people and more systems and more players. But once you align around and then simplify that vision and execute properly, you can't fail.
Yeah. Just to conclude, one reason I respect you is you mentioned P's, but what I hear is your ultimate P is people. and you've started a network for women at Coca-Cola and mentoring, and it's growing quite large, and it's important. It's also not something you just do for show. In 2 weeks, I have the honor. I'm going to come over and speak to a new mentoring network at Coca-Cola for all your employees of color. I mean, I think in the diversity of people, you really have a passion, and I think that's what makes the Coca-Cola company great, and I think it's what makes you a great leader. If we could thank Muhtar, Ken.
Could I read or yeah. Mr. Ken, as we open this up for questions,
Please call me Muhtar.
Muhtar, as we open this up for questions, I'd like to take the honor of the first one. As you may remember, what started us in the quest to have you come speak is our students.
If you're going to stand up, I'll stand up too.
Our students are going to Turkey this year, as you know. And in fact, Lena is helping us with that.
I didn't know.
And at any rate, what I would like you to do, if you could, is share something with them that they might not read in the book about Turkey that will help them gain appreciation for your beloved land.
Where are they? Where are you going?
We'll be in Istanbul.
Istanbul. Well, that's not Turkey. Anyway, I'm glad you are. And, it's difficult to say. Just try to make sure that you can, just spend time walking around the streets, and rather than just going around to the local, all the different known sites. Just go out of the beaten track and just go to smaller shops and restaurants and so forth, and just sample the incredible diversity of that town. It never ceases to surprise me every time I'm there.
Well, I think that's what appealed to